Terra Caribbean is widely known for our commercial listings. On today's episode of Ask Terra Caribbean, we sit with Ronnie Ayoung of RGM to speak about the future of commercial real estate in Trinidad and Tobago. Ronnie, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Great to have you here, man, on our video series.
Good.
So as Senior Facilities Manager at RGM, give us a little history on RGM and what you guys do, a bit about the company.
Certainly, RGM is a leading commercial real estate developer and operator in Trinidad. We have just shy of 500,000 square feet of office space under our portfolio, made up about 7 buildings, ranging in size from about 30,000 square feet to 120,000 square feet. Most of them are in Port of Spain, Upper Port of Spain and around the Savannah. We do have one facility in Galeota. And we've been in operation since 1996 or thereabouts. We've hosted a number of large commercial corporate tenants at our offices over that period of time. My role at RGM is their senior facilities manager. My job is basically to ensure that the buildings operate safely, that they're well maintained, and at all times we support the operations of the tenants that operate inside. That's about it.
Fantastic. And you all have some of the best tenants in the market.
We think so.
Which also it makes them some of the most demanding tenants, right? So
Sometimes.
I'm sure they keep you on your toes with health and safety, etc. I'm proud to say that RGM and Terra Caribbean, I think we know the commercial office space better than anybody else in this market. Huh? And I think it'll be a great help to our audience to give a little insight as to what has happened over the last decade and a half.
Right.
Leading up to 2016 and the oil and gas changes, how that affected your tenant.
Sure. I mean, prior to 2016, we probably enjoyed rental rates in the average of about $16 a square foot. That's without CAM, of course. That was standard for us in terms of our portfolio performance. Coming into 2016, though, we certainly started seeing a reduction in those rates, and probably driven in part or in major part by the downturn in the oil and gas costs, prices locally and globally. Over that time, we also saw an increase in our CAM charges, CAM being common area maintenance charges. Those are directly tied to labor and material costs. So you'd appreciate that as markets went up in price, it affected CAM as well too. So that's what we saw leading into 2016. Before.
And allow me just to clarify CAM for the benefit of our audience, right? It's a transparent throughput. So it's basically the cost of running the building.
That's right.
Right, divided proportionately by the tenants and the amount of space they occupy.
Correct. So that's to ensure the building operates properly. Janitorial services, AC servicing, power washing the pavements, sometimes your receptionist costs. That's what CAM represents.
Right, so tenants can stick to their core business and they're not managing the property that they occupy.
Correct. So that's what we saw leading into 2016. Getting into 2016 and into 2019, we actually started to see our rental rates reduced by maybe 10, 15, maybe as much as 20%, which was uncommon. We also saw vacancy rates start to rise. So typically in the decade before 2016, we probably had vacancy rates in the low single-digit percentage-wise. From 16 to 19, that number started to increase and get into the double-digit range. And more importantly, it sat there. It stayed there for an extended period of time, which was unusual for us. So there was obviously a change in the environment happening around that time.
Yeah, so with your main tenant being the oil and gas industry, when that downturn happened, of course, it began putting pressure on rental rates, and the vacancy rates started increasing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was early, that's pre-COVID. Then came COVID and heavy work from home mandates and a new culture and style of working.
Absolutely.
How did that affect your...
Well, as you said, and then came COVID, right? So there was already a bit of a downturn that we were managing, as the case may be. And then as we got into COVID and the first lockdown, that drastically reduced occupancy in the building, albeit temporary, at least we thought at the time. It was business as usual for the most part, and we managed that. As we went into the second lockdown, of course, the impact on our tenants became a lot more significant. Certainly those who were in the food services industry were heavily impacted and affected. The smaller tenants who may not have been as resilient were next to feel that impact. And we had to adapt. We had to adapt in terms of how we presented the space, how we continued to operate the space, and how we address that for our tenants. All right. Some of them would have come to us to try and see what options they had in their lease to either reduce space that they occupied or renegotiate their leases if they were due for renewal. And those are measures we had to entertain at that time. In some cases, we provided some rental rebates. And in other cases, as I said, we would have renegotiated their leases at renewal when they landed in that period.
Yeah. So we witnessed many different landlords with various responses to this situation, right? And it's clear that those that worked with their tenants came out on top. Because it really is a partnership between landlord and tenant. The tenant has to be successful, it has to make financial sense. So those who gave discounts and rent rebates, tenants were more loyal.
Yeah.
But then, so that was during the period of lockdown. And then now things, just the way they work on the whole has changed. So the demand for office space has shifted.
So very much so, and we started to see that change in the I don't want to say the COVID is over entirely, but as we've come out of the lockdowns and so forth, we started to see that. Most significantly was that there was a difference in the demographic of the tenant that was expressing interest in our spaces. First, let me say, in the last 18 months, RGM has actually probably signed the most new tenants to office space that we ever had in that similar period, going back from when we started.
That's awesome, boy, considering the state of the market. I mean,
correct.
You guys are obviously doing something right, and we've witnessed how you repackaged your space to really offer the tenant what they need, right?
Precisely. And that was a surprise to us, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. But what we saw was a different type of tenant. So gone are the days when tenants wanted 10,000 and 20,000 square feet of office space. The interest we get now is for the 2, 3, 5,000 square feet of space. And also what the tenants are asking for in the facility has changed as well. Amenities are a big thing for them now. Does the building provide conferencing center, a gym, social areas to gather, a rooftop terrace for entertaining? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Those type of things have become more in demand. And what we've done in the last few months certainly was refocus how we, as you said, repackage our buildings. We've put some effort and assets in place to provide some more of those amenities that may not have been there in our buildings before. And we're starting to reap some rewards from it. We're seeing, as I said, increased interest in our facilities.
Yeah, interesting. So what we've seen is there's not a lot of new business coming in, but the businesses that are here, mm-hmm. they may be downsizing, and some of them are taking the opportunity now, as the rental rates have decreased in the A-class segment, to move from B to A-class space.
Yep.
So they may be downsizing from 10,000 to 5,000 square feet, but they move into a slightly better quality space.
Definitely.
At a reduced rate. And I think what you guys have done well, and what I encourage all landlords to do, is ease the move for the tenant, right? So in order to ease the cash flow, you offer a rent-free period on the front end of the lease. Mm-hmm. Because the big cost is moving, and outfitting the space that the tenant is moving into. Mm-hmm. And what you all have done well, as I mentioned earlier, repackaging space, maybe even outfitting the space. Mm-hmm. If there's furniture, you throw some furniture in there. So you get them in, give them a bit of a rent-free where they can redirect that capital to the capital expenses and get them in, work with them over the period.
Yeah. With the smaller tenants showing interest now, as you were saying, we're seeing a lot of that now, that whereby they're asking for space that is fully outfitted or semi-outfitted, again, to ease that move-in during these times, as the case may be. So we've always provided that to some degree. We do it so a little bit more now, with certainly with the smaller spaces that we're offering. And I think it's been well received by most of the tenants, quite frankly.
Absolutely. So, you know, nobody has a crystal ball, but I always like to ask the professionals and the experts in this field their thoughts. And I'm going to ask you on the future of office space, and where do you see that going as far as the office home, work from home relationship?
Right. I don't. So that whole hybrid work model certainly came in during COVID and so forth. I don't see that continuing in a significant way. Some of it has to definitely stay, but just by evidence of our experience in the last year or so, we're seeing interest in tenants coming back to the workplace. Don't get me wrong, hybrid work, I think to some degree is here to stay regardless. I think it will be a little bit more flexible though, depending on the time of year or the type of tenant, as the case may be. So we need to understand that. But to say that that the real estate market is going to be significantly changed in the long term, I don't think so. I think there's a move to reoccupy buildings safely and more efficiently and more effectively, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I believe the office is here to stay, but so is work from home and remote working, right? So for certain roles, it just works best for that specific employee or colleague to work remotely.
Correct.
And you know, gone are the days of a 1.5 in traffic jam on both sides of the work day. I mean, really, that has to be the most inefficient option around, right? So the hybrid is where it's at, and that's why we would see tenants looking for shared spaces, shared conference rooms,
correct,
so that they can kind of flex and swell as their staff come into the office,
precisely,
and contract accordingly. You know, Ronnie, there's so much we could talk about. I mean, I want to get into green buildings with you. I mean, I know you guys built the first LEED certified building in the English-speaking Caribbean, Savannah East. I mean, a fantastic
Very proud
project.
Of it. Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, but we can go on about that, and maybe another time we'll bring you out to talk a bit more about green buildings and the future, because obviously the tenants are calling for that. Are you seeing that?
We're absolutely seeing that. Certainly from the industries that are into energy, petrochemical and so forth, but also other types of industries who occupy our building spaces. And I think that's something that most landlords need to look at. In our attempt to manage costs and be more efficient and quite frankly be sustainable and respectful of the environment, our buildings need to adapt in that manner and become more efficient, become more sustainable. And we're doing that. We've done it with Savannah East. We're doing it in terms of retrofitting some of our existing buildings. And I think it's a necessary approach that landlords should think about going forward.
Absolutely. It's definitely on the top of the list for the tenants that come to us, right?
Yep.
So even if you adjust and modify existing buildings to make them a little more efficient, maybe that's where we are in the short term before we start building again, because we've done the analysis, boy, and to build from scratch now, the rates that you have to charge your tenant for that to make financial sense, it really doesn't justify it in this environment.
Correct.
With these sky-high material and construction costs.
Correct.
So we kind of have to work with what we have here and watch how this whole logistic madness kind of settles.
And we have good stock. We have good stock that we could either repurpose or, you know, reuse differently, as the case may be. I think we should pay some attention there as well.
Absolutely. Well, great, man, Ronnie. Thanks again for coming in and meeting with me, man. It's always good to see you.
Good chatting with you. Nice to be here.
And for the customers out there looking for commercial office space, come to Terra Caribbean and we'll guide you to the right landlord. One of which, of course, is our good friends at RGM.
Thanks a lot, JP.
Thank you, Ronnie.